or people think they can't meditate because when they try, their mind doesn't go blank. And I would say that the purpose of meditation is not to empty out your mind. The purpose of meditation, in my opinion, is simply just to become aware of what's arising in the present moment. So if that's a busy mind, great. You're aware of the fact that you have a busy mind. So there's no such thing as being bad at meditating or not being able to meditate. Again, if you can stand still or sit still, close your eyes, take a breath, and notice something, then that's flawless execution of meditation or mindfulness, in my opinion.
Reality is...
We're live.
Oh, welcome to the very first ever episode of the Reality Is podcast. Featuring Joe Niemchak.
Joe Niemchak. Welcome. Welcome, Joe. Is there so fun? Welcome to Joe. Thanks for being with us today on our podcast. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about things that you're interested in, what you like to do, who you are. Everyone wants to know.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, Joe, who are you?
Who am I?
Question.
I'm a dude. I live in Chapel Hill. I like AI, meditation, mindfulness, YouTube, and good company.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I guess one background context so we can give the audience is how we've come to meet Joe. And we actually met Joe, so we're filming this episode in July of 2025, and we first met Joe in person in July of 2023. And we met Joe actually through YouTube. And particularly, it was through this YouTube video that Joe had filmed or recorded his podcast session with Frank Yang. I guess we can explain who Frank Yang is for the audience. Joe, would you like to give an introduction?
I'll give an introduction to my understanding of Frank Yang when I first found him. So I was studying in Hong Kong at the time, and I had started meditating like 4 months before that probably, and I discovered Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements and the Mastery of Love, and I'd gone to a Mahayana Buddhist temple for my first meditation in Arizona before leaving for Hong Kong. And that practice made sense in my head and opened up something in my heart for the first time ever. I was very closed off before that. And I continued to meditate. One of my friends in Hong Kong was like, you need to meet my friend Cosby. Shout out Cosby. Cosby had gone on a 10-day Vipassana retreat previously. He had studied Buddhist metaphysics pretty extensively, and he was a big fan of Frank Yang. So it's 4:20 in Hong Kong. A foot-long joint has been rolled. Cosby had invited to the home. He shows me a video of Frank Yang, and then we go to the bathroom to smoke this joint. And Cosby was telling me about Buddhist metaphysics for the first time. And I was very open and excited and elated to be learning things about spiritual truth, so to speak. I had taken only one puff of this joint by the time Cosby had started explaining some of these Buddhist metaphysical theories like emptiness and jhanas and infinite space, things of that nature. And he started describing an out-of-body experience that he had. And I closed my eyes and the same out-of-body experience happened to me, more or less. So for the next 2 hours, I was totally out of body. I was like looking at myself from the third person point of view. And then I went into this space that was just totally beyond any like room that I was in or anything I had experienced before. And I came back pretty shocked from that. But the only spiritual resource I had at that point in time was literally Frank Yang. So I just binge watched a ton of Frank Yang videos, and it honestly wasn't too helpful because Frank's material and content now I think is like pretty good for a lot of people who are like starting to get into this stuff. He has more instructional guides on how to meditate and stuff like that. But at that point in time, he just had a ton of very artistic representations of enlightenment and Buddhist philosophy and non-duality. And yeah, it was much more of like a creative expression than it was a teacher trying to help people going through things. But Frank is a guy from Taiwan who started to maximize his bodily potential. He used to be a fitness YouTuber and was like really big in that space initially. Got like a 40+ inch vertical, was lifting weights all the time. And then at some point in time, he transitioned to philosophy and meditation, and that was the center of his content. Now he's known for awakening and enlightenment content that is filmed through the 360 camera and then the iPhone stuff that he does. So cool Taiwanese dude who's enlightened, I guess.
Yeah, we love Frank.
Yeah, shout out Frank.
Shout out Frank.
Yeah, and I guess because he was my only reference for a lot of spiritual things, I really looked up to him and I was like, this guy's enlightened. This is the way to get enlightened. Like, I was idolizing Frank quite a bit. So as I was creating my YouTube channel, I really valued his perspective, asked if we could call. I think it was like just a consciousness coaching call that he put on his YouTube channel, and I just decided to record it. So it was literally him coaching me. And I just asked him questions, and it was insightful, what I needed at the time. And there was one part of that interview that both of you mentioned frequently where me and Frank just stared at each other and didn't say anything for like 3 minutes straight, I want to say. That was probably the highlight of the interview.
Yeah, that part of the interview really got me because the first time I saw it, I thought that my computer screen had like I thought like the video like glitched and like it was like loading or something, but really they were just like both completely still, just staring directly at each other. And once I realized what was happening, I just like it was the most hilarious thing.
Yeah. So shout out Frank. Lots of things have happened since then, but that YouTube video was a big catalyst for my channel specifically. I started seeing my subscriber count go up, more engagement on my videos. Y'all reached out to me via Instagram, I want to say, which I don't have Instagram anymore, but I started getting in contact with a lot of very cool meditators and people just interested in similar stuff from him being on the channel. And that's what created a sense of like Sangha or spiritual community for me. I didn't have that at home. I didn't have that wherever I was traveling at the time. And I felt very isolated and lost in my spiritual path. And having more people come to me through that video allowed me to start having more of a spiritual community when it came to this stuff. And then many of the people that I met would reflect something similar back to me. They would say, wow, it's just nice to have somebody that I can talk about this stuff with because I don't know anybody else who I can talk about it with. And that's started to become a pretty big mission of mine, is just to connect people in community for their spiritual endeavors so they don't have to feel so isolated on this journey that is like, can be wildly complex and challenges a lot of belief systems that people have. And there's a lot of unnecessary suffering, I think, that I endured and many people endure through being isolated in this path of this journey.
Yeah. It seems really common that a lot of people that first wake up to non-duality and ego death are very isolated. And, it's strange that didn't happen to me, but it seems like a lot of people I met have told me that that's what they went through. So very good that you realized that and decided to address that because it probably helped a lot of people.
Yeah, fortunately, I think it has. And that's probably something I think about often now, is not just when it comes to spiritually oriented things, but just well-being in general and community in general. It feels most of my content and focus previously was on this concept of enlightenment, but now it's really much more focused towards just cultivating more well-being for the collective in whatever way that looks like. And I guess that's what draws us together. We talk about quantum biology a lot. We talk about getting into nature. We talk about entrepreneurship. We talk about integrating AI into our lives, eating healthy, meditation, yoga, just enjoying ourselves, being open, dancing, being silly, all of that stuff, and sharing that with people. There's so much isolation. And there's a lot of negativity as well. I have recently read a lot of David Hawkins' work, and he talks about growing in consciousness, but grounds that in emotional states of being. And he has this line in his scale of consciousness that distincts falsehood from truthhood. And at that line is the level of, I wouldn't say it's encouragement, but it's where like I can'ts become I can. And I had a coaching call with somebody earlier today, and they were expressing frustration over their family because they were like, my family is obese, they have poor health habits, they are angry all of the time, they have so much opportunity and potential to be happy. And I know it's accessible to them because I've found mindfulness, I've found these perspectives, but they're not embodying them in some sort of way. And I was telling him that most people that operate below that space of encouragement typically have a very negative self-view and don't see any positive or redeeming traits in themselves, and they don't think they can make the changes. So they're stuck in this perpetual loop of negativity. So the best thing that we can do oftentimes is just encourage one another and say, no, like you can do whatever it is. What are your goals? What if you had no limitations, what would you do? And we can lift each other up towards those goals in some sort of way. So yeah, what initially started as like building spiritual community for the awakening journey has really just turned into something more pragmatic in my eyes, which is doing what we can to uplift one another and cultivate more well-being in every way holistically. But I think that primarily starts with emotional well-being within ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the strategies to well-being that I've come to associate with you a lot is mindfulness, and I feel like that'd be a great segue into something to explain to the audience is what is your relationship with mindfulness?
Right.
How could you encourage people who might have heard of mindfulness and but maybe not really have had much of a relationship within their lives? What advice might you give them?
Yeah. I think like with the concept of mindfulness specifically, it's important to keep an open mind and a beginner's mind with all of it. I tend to explain mindfulness in a situation like this where somebody's like, hey, I've never really heard of that. Can you explain it to me? And I tend to give an explanation, and then they immediately affirm that explanation, say they understand it, and then later on will give an expression and use the word mindfulness in a way that is very different than how I intended it to be. And I don't think that's necessarily anybody's fault. I don't think that's me explaining it poorly or them embodying it poorly. But with anything in life, I think it's important to cultivate like an open mind and progressively find value in building a deeper relationship to certain concepts or ideas or practices. So I will say this from my perspective of somebody who has been building my relationship with mindfulness for about 5 years now, but am open to uh, that relationship continuing to deepen and my understanding of the concept to continue to evolve as well. But I think first and foremost, mindfulness is something that each individual has their own unique perception of. And for me, it was initially informed by a lot of Buddhist literature, like modern pragmatic Dharma stuff. So through Frank Yang, I discovered Daniel Ingram and his book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And that started to inform my lens of mindfulness. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this book called The Miracle of Mindfulness. The Mind Illuminated incorporates different definitions of mindfulness. The Joy of Living by Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche talks a lot about mindfulness, and there's probably been a good like 10 to 15 other books on mindfulness. Shinzen Young has his unified mindfulness program. Michael Taft is the Mindful Geek that he's written. And let's see, John Kabat-Zinn, he introduced mindfulness-based stress reduction to the West. There's been a lot of studying and reading and contemplating over this concept of mindfulness, and that has led me to associate the word mindfulness with just awareness. So you could extend that definition to be something like a non-judgmental awareness of thoughts, actions, and emotions, or a non-judgmental awareness of your entire experience. So within your experience, if we investigate it clearly, there's really just our 5 senses and thought. So seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, and thinking. And mindfulness is the awareness that precedes all of those things, you could say. And awareness by nature is non-judgmental. So that's why I say mindfulness is awareness. But I think it's important if somebody hasn't been exposed to the concept to add the layer of non-judgmental to mindfulness. So if I'm here right now and I'm experiencing warmth in my body and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm so hot right now, I could choose to label that as a negative or a bad thing. I want to escape the heat and make myself cold. But a mindful approach would just to simply notice that there's warmth here and not try to change the situation at all, but just say, oh, this is warm. What is that like? And that what is it like is an extension of curiosity. So I think curiosity is a big aspect of mindfulness as well. It's like you're inhabiting this beginner's mind, this childlike mind, just constantly asking why or investigating why within your experience. So I can be mindful of the fact that this microphone is in front of me, that I just raised my hands to point at the microphone, that my voice is expressing in the way that it's expressing through the speed of my voice or the tone of my voice. I could be aware of how my thumb just tapped the back of my Achilles and how much pressure my thumb tapped the back of my Achilles with. You can be aware of anything in your experience and just being curious about how this is happening and why it's happening, and non-judgmentally doing so is how I would start to describe the concept of mindfulness. But then you have formal mindfulness and informal mindfulness practices. So something like an informal mindfulness practice could be like what I'm doing right now. You can embody and practice mindfulness at any point in time throughout the day. So again, as I'm speaking to you, I can notice that I see a ring light in your glasses right now, Eric. I notice that both of your hands are clasped together in a specific way. Now I'm noticing the yellow color of the bracelet that you're wearing and how it's tied right now. But that's while I'm actively doing something in the world. Versus a formal mindfulness practice is something like sitting completely still, choosing to direct attention to something, direct awareness to something, and then really being with that object. So if I close my eyes and I take a breath in and a breath out, I can just notice what it's like to breathe. How does my stomach move when I breathe? How does my chest move when I breathe? What are the sensations of my nostrils when I breathe in and out? Do I notice that on the inhale, it's actually cool in my nostrils, but on the exhale, it's actually warm in my nostrils? Taking the time to be completely still and very acutely notice or become aware of different aspects of your experience is a formal mindfulness practice. And I think a lot of people will use the word mindfulness or meditation very sparingly. And they're like, well, walking is my meditation, or cooking is my meditation, or talking to my friends is my meditation. And I think that's a very valid use of the word, but I do also think that there is an importance in distinguishing formal meditation practice versus informal meditation practice, or formal mindfulness practice versus informal mindfulness practice. And I equate it something to like functional fitness at the gym. So if you go to the gym and you really push your muscles hard on a day-to-day basis, then your regular standard everyday activities become a lot easier. But that doesn't mean the execution of your standard everyday activities, like carrying the groceries inside of the house, is the equivalent to the workout you do in the gym, but they do play off of each other. So yeah, above all else, mindfulness being like a playful, curious, non-judgmental awareness of whatever arises in your experience.
You would say like, if you have a judgmental thought that comes up about some sensation, that you could be mindful of that judgmental thought as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it can get kind of meta.
right, for sure. Like, there's no need to judge the fact that you're judging something.
Right.
One of my favorite quotes is, resistance to resistance is still resistance. So if I'm sitting down and I notice that I really want to move my legs because my knees are hurting for whatever reason, there's no need to abandon that part of me that's judging or having a preference over experience. I can notice that there's a judgment there, and I can choose not to judge the fact that I'm judging. So yeah, it does get a little meta right there.
Yeah. There's a lot of people tell me like, oh, I'm bad at meditating.
Right.
If someone tells you they're bad at meditating, what do you say to that?
I hear that frequently. I hear I'm bad at meditating, and I hear I can't meditate very often. Um, and that's funny to me because I don't think there's such thing as being bad at meditation.
Right.
Yeah, like meditation simply is. And so if you can literally sit still and take one deep breath in and one deep breath out, to me, that is an expression of meditation. And you've done it perfectly. And even if you judge yourself for that or said, my breath wasn't deep enough or it wasn't shallow enough or whatever it may be, that doesn't mean that your breath was bad or your meditation was bad. And the I can't on meditation is interesting too, because people think that they're bad at meditation because they can't empty out their mind completely. They don't have a blank mind. Or people think they can't meditate because when they try, their mind doesn't go blank or empty. And I would say that the purpose of meditation is not to empty out your mind. That may simply be a byproduct of a continued practice that takes place. But the purpose of meditation, in my opinion, is simply just to become aware of what's arising in the present moment. So if that's a busy mind, great. You're aware of the fact that you have a busy mind. Now we can talk about that. Now you can investigate, oh, what is a thought really? What does it mean for my mind to be busy? What's my relationship to my mind? So there's no such thing as being bad at meditating or not being able to meditate. Again, if you can stand still or sit still, close your eyes, take a breath, and notice something, then that's flawless execution of meditation or mindfulness, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for a lot of people to hear because, a lot of people really get hung up on that. And there's no need to. You want to meditate, just go for it. Don't worry about it. If your mind's busy, it's all good. If you're mindful and your mind's empty, same difference.
And yeah, I find too, a lot of people tend to feel overwhelmed by how active their mind is. And sometimes it's nice just to be in the fire with the mind and let it be there and really focus on it. But many meditation practices and most mindfulness meditation practices would direct you to orient your attention to something that isn't thought for that reason specifically. So even if thoughts are really going on actively in your mind, you don't have to focus on the thoughts. You can ground yourself in the breath, for example. And if your attention gets taken over by thought, a common way of conceptualizing the practice is like, say you choose to focus on the breath and then your attention gets pulled away into thought. The act of noticing that your attention is now lost in thought and then moving that attention back to the breath is like one bicep curl for the mental muscle of mindfulness or for the mental muscle of concentration, you could say. And that is the practice. That's something to celebrate. So many people are like, oh, I meant to focus on my breath, but I got lost in thought for the whole time. It's like, okay, you noticed that you got lost in thought. That's an insight right there. That's something new about your experience. Now you can work with that. Or maybe they sit down for a 5-minute meditation and they say, I got lost in thought 15 times, but I brought it back to the breath. And they're upset that they got lost in thought 15 times, rather than celebrating the fact that they noticed they got lost in thought 15 times, right? We're able to bring it back to the breath. Yeah.
Yeah. And so would you say that you've implemented the practice of noting in your practice at some point in time?
Yeah. So for context for the viewers, I guess noting is a meditation practice that, from my understanding, originated in Burma under the Theravada tradition of Mahasi Sayadaw, who was a Burmese monk. And there are many different ways to note. Daniel Ingram, who I mentioned earlier, one of his favorite meditation books is some sort of how to note or something like that by Mahasi Sayadaw. It's like an 80-page pamphlet. And I have not read the whole thing, but it gets very in detail about different ways that you can note. So one simple way to note is just those 5 senses and thinking. And you can say it out loud or you can do it inside of your head. But it's really to simplify your experience so you can understand the components that make it up. It's very easy to get lost in stories of the mind. And you could come back from meditation and say, oh, I was thinking about what I did yesterday or this thing that happened in my childhood or whatever it may be. But all of those stories really just represent thinking. And so in a noting practice, instead of getting caught up in the stories, you can just note thinking. But it's whatever you're noticing in any given moment. So if I were to close my eyes, I would probably do this within my head, so to speak, not verbally, but for the sake of the podcast, I'll say it verbally. A noting practice could look something like this: thinking, feeling, hearing, thinking, feeling, feeling, seeing, thinking, feeling, hearing, etc. It goes like that. And eventually, you don't even really mentally note verbally like that. That can be a great way to start the practice. But at some point in time, you just kind of notice the sensations or the senses or the thought. But Mahasi Sayadaw, in that book that Daniel Ingram mentions, which I'm forgetting the name of, but he would say something along the lines of like, you could even note in your day-to-day life. So right now I could say, speaking, intending, moving, seeing, intending, moving, intending, waving, etc. Like with everything that you do, if you go to pick up a glass of water, before you pick up the glass of water, note that you have the intention to pick up the glass of water. Some people just note this or that, this, that. You could even simplify it and just note this all the time. So it's really whatever works for you. And some people would even say that you can note like a certain number of sensations per second. So in Daniel Ingram's book, he talks about this. If I start tapping my fingers like this, I can note the physical sensation of feeling every time I tap. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, tap, 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 tap. Now I can add another hand in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's about 8 sensations a second that I'm noting right there. And apparently you can get up to the point where you're noting like 50 to 100 sensations a second. And it's basically like testing your processing speed of being able to consciously recognize all the things arising in your experience. And maybe the bigger point there is just understanding that there's always so much sensory data taking place in our experience and so much that we're unaware of. And we can train in awareness or train in mindfulness to become more aware of what's going on in our own experience. And if we're more aware of what's going on in our experience, then we have more to work with in order to derive insights about why this thing we call experience is the way that it is. Yeah.
You could say like, you can sit down for a full meditation practice, or you can implement the noting practice at any time, like you were saying.
Right.
And in that way, you become meditative in your everyday life.
Right.
So you don't have to only sit and practice and only practice noting when you're sitting, or only, be intentional and aware where you're sitting. You can do it all the time. And probably I would say that's a good idea if you're interested, because you probably become a beast the fastest if you implement that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say that gets into like formal versus informal mindfulness again. So if you do the formal practice consistently, it's naturally going to seep into your day-to-day life and you become more meditative. I also think like generally being non-resistant to your experience is the biggest thing though. So like I used to exercise a lot of effort in many of my meditation practices. Now it's become a lot more effortless. So you can kind of strain your mind to constantly be noting and feel like, oh, the right thing for me to do is to be noting all of the time. And I think at some point in time that kind of has to be let go in a sense. And you just let experience take place. And that might be a deeper expression of being meditative than like constantly trying to attune to something in your experience.
You gotta be really aware whenever that intention slips into effort. And then once it becomes like effort, when you're grinding, it's like, okay, then you kind of lost your way a little bit. Come back to that.
Yeah.
That alignment, that calm.
Right. And it's interesting because like some might say that at the beginning to spark the practice and an understanding of this stuff, then some effort might be needed. But yeah, I'm personally a fan of sinking into comfort and effortlessness and just letting life flow.
Yep, I'm with that.
Cool.
All right. We are back.
We're back. Yeah, we back.
With Joe Niemchak. Back with Joe Niemchak. And yeah, so lastly we were talking about mindfulness.
Yeah.
And now we want to talk about the intersection of mindfulness and something you're very passionate about, AI.
Yes, technology. Yes. So this is pretty fascinating how this came to be. And Frank Yang, who we talked about earlier in this episode, Buddy AI, which is the AI that I've been working on for the past 2 years or so, was actually Frank Yang's first interaction with generative AI. And that's on my YouTube channel.
Hilarious. I remember seeing that video.
Yes, it's like Frank Yang uses AI for the first time or something is on there.
Wait, what was his reaction to?
He was pretty neutral about it all. He's like, "Oh, this is pretty cool."
Yeah.
And it's like classic Frank first. I think it's funny because like the intention of Buddy as it's evolved over time is to help users grow in awareness or grow in mindfulness for the sake of contributing to their flourishing in some sort of way. So, Buddy acts like a mirror to the user, but I'm also been playing around with helping users of Buddy actively take some sort of action towards mindfulness. So how can you create an LLM that is prompting the user to take deep breaths? And not only can it prompt the user to take a deep breath or engage in a mindfulness practice, but how does the user actually start to engage in that as well? That's a challenging thing to think about and not the first kind of use case that we're using for it. Because you can grow in mindfulness or grow in awareness of your experience just by journaling, for example. And that seems to be like a more pragmatic application of Buddy. But long story short, it is this idea of how we can leverage technology and I guess the cutting edge of technology to help people grow in mindfulness because I view mindfulness to be the foundation of human flourishing. So mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness-based human flourishing is kind of what I think about. When you base everything that you do in mindfulness, because it is the core. Awareness is the fundamental aspect of our entire experience. You cannot work out without being aware of the fact that you're working out. You cannot record a podcast without being aware of the fact that you're recording a podcast. You cannot have a conversation without being aware of who you're conversing to. So hypothetically, awareness is this fundamental building block which supercharges everything else that you can do. So from my perspective, if you can help people raise their awareness, then they can apply that to anything else in their life. So my foundation is mindfulness, and I choose to apply that to building AI systems that help people build their awareness as well. And therein lies the idea of Buddy. So Buddy has evolved in many iterations over the years, but currently I'm working with 2 engineers to essentially create a similar product to something called deepwander.com right now. Deepwander is very cool. I think it's a great product. I admire everything that they've done. And I have a vision for Buddy and basically a social platform that builds connection and awareness called HiveMind. And then I'm very into personal knowledge management and building a visual profile of your mind, a digital mind, if you will. And that part of your profile is called Mind on there. But the initial foundation for Buddy to be on that would then start to build your mind and then connect users on the HiveMind would be something very similar to what Deepwander has going on. So Deepwander is an AI-powered journaling platform that I've been engaging with. And you log on, you have some sort of journal prompt that you may start with, and you type in there as much as you want, and then you can click a dive deeper button. So for example, today I was talking about aligning my career with my passions and my values. I know we have had conversations over the past couple of days since you all have been in town about how you can sustainably manage yourself financially while not getting your soul sucked out of you in some sort of way. So how can you execute something that you're passionate about, something that's value aligned and something that's of benefit for all of humanity while also being financially abundant at the same time? And that's what my journal entry was about today. So I started talking about that a little bit. I was able to click dive deeper on Deepwander. It would read whatever I had typed, and then it gave me 3 prompts that I could reflect on after that. So maybe I click on one of the prompts. Maybe I talked about my values being of love, compassion, awareness, truth, whatever it may be. And I talked about how I'm very interested in AI systems and potentially getting a job, building out something like Buddy. And then maybe one of the prompts that it asks when I click Dive Deeper is, how do you envision the weight of your values contributing to your career? Or what values do you prioritize most when looking for an aligned career opportunity or financial opportunity, for example? So maybe I would journal more about that. And then I could click that deeper and it gives me more prompts based off of what I wrote. Or I could click finish the journal session at any point in time. After the journal session ends, it gives you a summary of your journal session and then some sort of psychological analysis. So it's looking at the emotional undertones of your journal. It may say that I'm hopeful, optimistic, fearful, whatever it may be. And then what I really enjoy is just an objective analysis. So Chat GPT, for example, can be very overly optimistic. It can hype you up a lot. It can basically make you out to be this like godlike, magnificent figure.
Yeah, it's very affirming.
Right. Instead of just keeping it real with you. Versus Deep Wonder is very clearly programmed to give you an objective analysis that doesn't make you out to be good or bad or right or wrong. It just says, okay, well, the user indicated a mild frustration with not being able to align their core values with financial abundance, which could indicate something in their past that meant that they had to compromise their creative vision for something. More or less stuff like that as you continue to journal. And then after that, it gives you some suggestions for how you could move forward in your life. So the platform's great. I think it's cool. The analysis was helpful to me. I made some sort of association between why I enjoyed my product role at Microsoft and being the point guard of my basketball teams growing up. So growing up, I played basketball. I was always the point guard. And as the point guard, you're kind of like the floor general. You're calling the plays, you're instructing people where they should be, you're reading the defense, and you are like the coach on the court, basically. And that allows me to understand everybody on the team, understand their strengths and their weaknesses, understand the other team, and basically call the right play and move in a right way and direct the offense in a way that would allow us to score. But it takes kind of a meta understanding of all the components at play to get the outcome that you want. And my product management role in Microsoft was really similar. We had the Surface laptop that we were building. We had the competitor, which was Google Chromebook. We had all of these different teams within Microsoft that was working on this Surface laptop. So we had the marketing team, the finance team, the software team, the hardware team, and I was the product planning lead of it all. So I was kind of like the point guard of the project, essentially saying like, this is the outcome we want. This is the product that we want to make. These are all of my teammates in here. I'm understanding the strengths and weaknesses of my teammates. I'm helping them understand each other better and helping create more effective communication so we can accomplish this end goal. That was an insight that I got as a byproduct of journaling on Deep Wonder that I had never made in my mind before, which was helpful for me. And to me, it validates the need for a product like that and the introduction of a product like that. I don't know what Deep Wonder's long-term goals are, but something like Buddy, for example, can start by understanding the user through getting a sense of their journal entries over time, prompting them well. Deep Wonder advertises themselves as an AI companion, but it doesn't really feel like a companion. It kind of just feels like you're typing and then you're working with this software and it's kind of prompting you in some sort of way, but it doesn't feel alive. It doesn't feel personal in any way. I think ChatGPT actually does a pretty good job of feeling pretty alive and like another entity of sorts. So combining that robust analysis with Deep Wonder and that personalized feeling of ChatGPT, that's kind of where you get Buddy, so to speak. But Buddy is only step one in the ecosystem of creating something like HiveMind. So as somebody builds a relationship with Buddy and Buddy reflects that person back to themselves, creates core insights about who they are as an individual, that person is becoming more self-aware, growing in mindfulness and awareness, getting a more clear idea for like what their worldly goals are, et cetera, et cetera. And then in the analysis, it can give an emotional tone of who you are. So what we want to do is use David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, which equates levels of consciousness with emotional states of being. And maybe at the bottom of David Hawkins' scale, you have emotions like fear, guilt, and shame that leads up to anger, encouragement, which we were talking about earlier in the podcast. And then you get into emotions like neutrality, reason, love, joy, peace, etc. And If we could map out the emotional tone of somebody's journal entries over time, then we can start to get an idea for where they fall on this map of consciousness and then how we can help them grow in consciousness or grow in awareness. So this profile, the psychological profile or understanding of where somebody is at in their spiritual or conscious journey, or even just in their growth emotionally as a human being, that can be a profile created by Buddy. And that would be the user's mind. So that is a digital representation of your mind that Buddy is creating for you. And being able to see your mind reflected back to you on a screen would create hypothetically more self-awareness. And there's another software that I use called Obsidian, which is like a note-taking tool that I really enjoy. And that would be another aspect involved here. So the journals that you write within Buddy would obviously be notes that you're taking about yourself. But at any point in time, if you just wanted to type in some notes onto the platform, then Buddy could take in that context as well. Maybe if I'm meeting with a coaching client, or if this podcast was online, or even if it's being recorded in some sort of way, I could feed this into the platform and Buddy could understand me more based off of that. So this would kind of be like a verbal journal entry, so to speak. Every word that I say is going into my mind and Buddy is analyzing that. Every word that Connor says is going into his mind. Every word that Eric says is going into his mind. So now Eric has his Buddy that's trained on him and is building out his mind based off of all of his interactions with the world. I have the same thing. Connor has the same thing. Great. So now we each have a Buddy that's understanding us more. Foundationally, that can start with the journals, but then it would extend onto Buddy basically being with you in your day-to-day experience in some way, shape, or form. And then from there, now that we have a profile that mirrors yourself and understands you much better than maybe say a Facebook or an Instagram, even a YouTube or a personal website, just due to the nature of the content that you're putting into it. And then you have the profile. Now, Buddy within the platform can start understanding the profiles. And then if you opt in for some sort of social feature, it can start connecting people to each other. So even if all three of us are already connected, maybe there have been times where I don't talk to either of y'all for months at a time. But based off of the journal entries that we're putting into Buddy, maybe Buddy understands that, oh my goodness, well, Eric and Connor are both working on this entrepreneurial endeavor right now, and they're looking to better their wellness in A, B, and C ways. Well, Joe is also working on a similar entrepreneurial endeavor right now, and he's upgrading his wellness through B, C, and D ways. They're both going through similar phases in their life, and I actually think it would be really positive if they had a conversation about maybe this specific collaboration on an entrepreneurial endeavor. So now Buddy would recommend that, hey, the three of y'all could have a conversation. Maybe it creates a group chat between the three of us on the platform, or schedule something on our calendar so then we can start chatting with each other. That's for people that already know each other. But there could be another user on HiveMind who's journaling, and maybe they're experiencing the exact same psychological insights that Eric is experiencing. And Buddy would be able to say, it would go to that user and it would go to you and it would say, hey, there's somebody that's very into ecology, very into digital nomad, very into spirituality and entrepreneurship. They are also starting a YouTube channel right now. They're talking about X, Y, and Z things. They have a decent sized following. You have a decent sized following. The intersection between your following is actually like very small, but both of y'all's channels and both of y'all's people might really benefit if you two were to have a conversation and potentially collaborate on a YouTube video. Well, now you have gotten a new connection with somebody who would be very fruitful for helping nourish your well-being, and vice versa in some sort of way that you wouldn't have known existed unless you had Buddy and HiveMind. And that takes this idea of like the 80-20 rule. So within business and within life, you hear the 80-20 rule a lot, but within business, you have 20% of what you're doing, which drives 80% of the results. So you want to make that 20% the new 100% or the new 80% for your action, so to speak. And this is the philosophy that has designed HiveMind as a social platform. So I met y'all through YouTube and I met y'all through Instagram. Y'all found my YouTube video and then sent me a DM on Instagram. So if I didn't have YouTube and I didn't have Instagram, then I would have never met y'all, and vice versa. And I've met so many beautiful people from social media specifically, but it's at the expense of hours of doom scrolling due to these algorithms that exist. So how can I take the 20% of my usage with Instagram and YouTube that has been most beneficial to me, which is literally just positive quality engagement with like-minded people or complementary-minded people, And how do I make that the entirety or most of the platform that I'm building, while taking away the 80% that didn't drive me any results with social media? So that 80% is the doom scrolling. It's the mindless content consumption. It's the brain rot that I'm getting as a byproduct of that. And herein lies HiveMind. It's not necessarily a platform for content consumption, but really to create profiles of people's mind, to document knowledge management within people specifically, and then to connect these individuals so they can eventually collaborate or meet in person or grow in their connection. Because this is another thing about well-being. If you look at flourishing studies for well-being, like Martin Seligman and the research that he does at UPenn, for example, he's created this flourishing framework, PERMA: positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And he found that the most positively contributing variable to somebody's flourishing and well-being is the quality of their relationships. So if you can create a platform that seeks to understand you and build a quality relationship within yourself, and then extend that into creating quality relationships with other people, that would be one way to maximize your well-being in some way, shape, or form. And then maybe the way that you and I engage in our connection contributes to more positive emotions, contributes to more engagement in my life. Obviously, it's nourishing that relationship part of PERMA. It brings more meaning to my life. And then if we collaborate on certain things, it's bringing more accomplishment as well. So it's really this idea of creating more quality relationships between people based off of facilitating deeper self-understanding and then connecting those users, all for the sake of upgrading well-being, awareness, consciousness for everybody. But that starts with Buddy. So yeah, we're building Buddy right now. Deep Wonder is an already proven model. It serves as a beautiful foundation for future visions of Mind and HiveMind, but it's a longer term project. So building Buddy, building Mind, building HiveMind, and seeing where all of that goes.
Yeah, this feels like such a powerful evolution of what social media is, because I hear so many people deleting their Instagram, deleting their Facebook, deleting all their social media accounts because they feel these algorithms choking them, like they're not using the social media anymore. The social media is using them.
Right.
And yeah, that's like originally social media is about connection. And then now it's breaking connection. It's like becoming this addiction to the algorithms. And then people realize it's like, wow, this is actually the opposite of connection. I'm just staring at my phone screen and not connecting with real people. So to have this evolution of the algorithm where it's not just showing you what you're interested in, but actually connecting you very succinctly, intentionally to people who share your interests, who like really a building community, just like in the most evolved, intelligent approach that I've heard of so far. I think that's a pretty huge development.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I really do think it's as simple as changing what the algorithm optimizes for. Right. So with something like Facebook or Instagram, and it even seems YouTube as well, the algorithm is optimizing to maintain your attention on the platform for as long as possible. Sure. So it's not really an algorithm that has your well-being and your best interest in mind. It has capturing your attention as the main thing in mind. And so I don't really care about creating a platform that's going to keep you on it for as long as possible. My goal would honestly be that you could do one journal entry with Buddy on HiveMind, and within that, you meet your best friend for life with that. So it really is an algorithm that just optimizes for something completely different than the currently existing landscape of social media.
It's like optimizing for value per time used in the algorithm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you could say that Instagram and Facebook and YouTube are also optimizing for that same equation, but it's optimizing for their customers, which are really the advertisers. So advertisers are going to pay money. Say I have a product, say I want to sell my coaching services on Instagram. Well, if I pay and spend $500 in advertisements on Instagram, I'm going to want as many people to come to me for coaching as possible, make as much money off of that ads. So if I spend $500 and I make $5,000, that's a good return on my ad spend. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, YouTube might be a little bit different because they pay the creators as well. But let's take Instagram and Facebook. Their customers are really the advertisers. And so they are trying to maximize like cost, like dollar spent and the time of the people that are spending it. Like if I put $500 into the ads, how can I, as quickly as possible, get as many leads for my business from Instagram? That's what they're trying to do. But if you're simply a consumer of Instagram or Facebook, you're now the product. And you're the product of or for the advertisers to consume. And this social media that you're consuming is not actually the product for you. You're the product for the advertisers. Yeah. And it's just nuts how that is commonly known. It is like tried and true, exactly what their business model is. But due to the nature of how addictive the algorithm is, people stay on the platforms. This is why I have deleted my Instagram and my Facebook accounts. Yeah.
So you would say like that's why those algorithms seem to be happening to you, not necessarily for you.
Yeah.
And then the hive mind algorithm will be happening for you, not to you.
Correct. Yeah. It would be with the intention to grow the well-being of all of the users. And so there's different ways that you could track that and get feedback for that. But yeah, exactly. And then people would say, well, what's your business model if you're not going to have advertisements or anything else? Well, I think you offer it free first to people, see if it works, see if they get value from it. And then if they do get value from it and it's a better social media experience, I think plenty of people would be willing to pay at least a couple dollars a month for that. But I think that's when you get into smart business decisions as well, because the initial version of this buddy platform is going to emulate Deep Wonder in a lot of ways. Deep Wonder is a pre-existing platform that already has a successful business model. So there's no reason that the buddy platform initially would not also be a successful business model. It's just not social media, but eventually it could turn into something like that.
You would say that main element that makes algorithms happening to you instead of for you is related to the advertising. That's the main element.
Yeah. Yeah. Per my understanding, and especially with Facebook and Instagram specifically. Yeah.
There is something about it. It's like the algorithms are trying to hack your brain, you know?
Yeah.
In a way that's like they're taking advantage of your weaknesses.
Right.
And so there's some harmonious switch that can be flipped. And I don't know, I'm having a hard time seeing it in my mind's eye. Is like, what does that switch look like, you know, to flip between an algorithm that is trying to like hack your brain, hack your dopamine, and an algorithm that is trying to create exactly what you're describing with hive mind.
Right. Yeah. This makes me think of something along the lines of love being patient. Because what makes the algorithm so addictive on Facebook or Instagram, and this is the thing, that like people shouldn't feel bad that they're addicted to these, because you literally have world-class psychologists that study the human brain and the human mind, like working together.
Right.
And like, who are you? It's just like a random person to be able to compete with that in some sort of way.
Yeah, it's easy to hack the human brain, right? We should be weak to all these things.
Right. And like with that being said, I think that's where mindfulness really takes a large role in all of this. Is I don't think that without a mindfulness practice, I wouldn't have been able to understand just how terrible these algorithms had been for me, and started to wane myself away from them and eventually delete my accounts. But that switch that you're talking about, I think, is understanding how are we hijacking the human brain right now with current content. Well, it's very short form. What goes viral and what is popular is constantly changing colors. It's a lot of colors. It's a lot of different cuts within the video specifically. It's drama that draws people in specifically. And I think, you know, with my own experience, there has been content that I have engaged with that has improved the quality of my direct experience and my well-being. So this experience right now is a form of content. I'm taking in visual content right now. So I'm talking to you, Eric, and I'm taking in auditory content as I listen to everything here. And you can extend that onto a screen or onto a book. So I've read many life-changing books, and I'm sure that many people can relate to that experience of you watch one YouTube video or you read one book or you read one article, and there's an insight in there that just radically changes the way that you think for the better. So if you can create quality content for people to engage with, and this is why I think knowledge is so important. You can receive knowledge, and then it's the applied knowledge of that leads to legitimate transformation within people. So the mind, the digital mind that is on HiveMind, is an expression of personal knowledge management. It is your digital mind, and your mind is just an expression of knowledge in many ways. So if I have all of this valuable knowledge, that's why y'all have brought me on a podcast episode because you perceive my knowledge to be valuable in some sort of way. If this knowledge is all expressed in my digital mind in some way, shape, or form, and then that knowledge is strategically facilitated to people who would benefit from it on the hive mind based off of what Buddy knows about them, then that is the switch that's flipped.
Yeah.
You have Buddy taking all of this information that somebody would be willing to share if they've made their mind public or parts of their mind public. And then you've given Buddy permission to facilitate this knowledge to users in a way that Buddy would predict would be valuable for them. And that doesn't mean we want to keep users retained on the platform. It means we want to somehow track that this knowledge is being digested and applied for legitimate transformation within the user. And that gets back to feedback and tracking in some sort of way that would be harmonious with the collective. But it is the facilitation of content for the intention itself of digesting that knowledge and then hopefully applying it in some sort of way. Versus if I'm getting shown some like crazy memes on Instagram that are just going to keep me scrolling, I don't know if the intention for that algorithm is necessarily switched or flipped for the perspective of, oh, we hope that this is really valuable knowledge for the user. They're going to take this, digest this, and then apply this to the real world in some sort of way that contributes to more well-being for the rest of the collective.
Yeah. So you really can code that kind of level of intentionality into an algorithm like you're describing with Buddy and HiveMind. And coding that into it, I mean, that still doesn't completely remove the element of personal responsibility from the equation, though, right? Because at the end of the day, we could still use that to create a trap of memes or, right, whatever brain rot content or anything like that. And so we still have to have that personal responsibility element at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. And, I'm not going to say I believe that this can be done. That's why I'm pursuing the project, but you don't know until it happens. Right. So I think like I try my best to be a representation of that on my day-to-day basis. So when we have conversations, my intention is to share my being and express my being in a way that's full of love and full of compassion and full of anything that would be helpful for the growth of anybody around me. And sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes you hurt people's feelings. Sometimes you say something and it actually really doesn't help their well-being at all. And that's some sort of safety aspect to consider with all of this. Like maybe if somebody receives some piece of information about nutrition, then it could trigger some sort of eating disorder or something. Like you never know what could happen, and you want to be careful with time as it passes with all of that. But I do find that in my own life, when I hold that intention, it does usually carry through and have a positive ripple effect. Like, if I were to ask you guys, have I had more of a positive or a negative effect on your well-being? I would hope that you would say a positive effect. Both of y'all had a very positive effect on my well-being, or at least I believe that to be true. And I think that comes from the collectively shared intention that we want to do something that's good and harmonious for each other. And so I think you just design with that same intention in mind.
Yeah. So it's a multi-layered effort. It's like the creators intentionally design the software, to be aligned with a conscious effort of truly improving your life and providing value, as well as the user of the platform has to have the personal responsibility at the end of the day to be able to use it for their own well-being. It's the two-way street.
Yeah, precisely. And we just want to make it as easy as possible for the user to seamlessly use it for their well-being. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the future of social media. So I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, I don't hear many people talk about that. So that level of conscientiousness and intentionality is very exciting and respectable.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Joe, as our first guest, and looking forward to many more episodes with you in the future.
Yeah, bro. Reality is, bro. Hey.
Thank you.
Peace and love. Peace.